Hey, welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video, and as the title says, I really have an axe to grind. This is another one of those weapons that I have in my medieval collection, and having now posted my Dungeons & Dragons eating iron rations video, this one didn't quite make it into that, and I just thought, well, I might as well give it its fair due. I mean, it's a kind of a fascinating discussion, so why not? Let's talk about my battle axe. Now, why is it wrapped in this burlap? First of all, that's when I got this, I was told, well, it's a very sharp blade, and basically I thought I better put something around this to both protect this thing in transit so it doesn't actually cut anybody, and secondly, something to give it a kind of a medieval look. What's noteworthy is I haven't actually taken this thing off in got to be 20 years now, and when I first got this axe, I was advised, it's probably a good idea to oil the blade every once in a while, or just the metal itself, because otherwise it'll rust. And I've always kind of kept an eye in here, and I can see the odd spot of rust there, so I guess I should probably give this an oiling sometime. But let's take the burlap protective layer off here, and I'll show you my battle axe. Now, there's an interesting story about this thing, and that's kind of why I thought, you know what, I'm definitely going to show off my axe, because not only does this particular one that I bought have a little bit of a tail to it, but battle axes in general really have a fascinating history and fiction to them as well. Anyway, let's open this thing up. Yeah, I just made this little kind of a cover so that people wouldn't get themselves cut on it, because I can tell you, now there you go, there's your proper battle axe, your medieval, do some serious damage battle axe there. And yeah, those blades are still really sharp, so this thing would hurt if now it's not really that dangerous, but as far as like walking around with this thing in your hand and just accidentally brushing that against your leg, I think you might cut yourself. So that's sort of why I put that thing on there. And yeah, I really haven't looked at this thing in a long time, but I can see, yeah, there's definitely some rust forming there. Otherwise, though, it's actually in pretty good shape considering its age. I got this back in the 80s when I lived in Britain, and again, story coming for that. Now, I guess let's give you the full thing. Like it goes on. It's a long, like two-handed weapon here, probably a good 3 feet long in total, and that head is pretty heavy. Like that's a real axe blade sitting there on the top. So, why did I get this? Well, when I did my video about both the Morning Star, which is technically a flail, and also the chainmail, I was mentioning that back in the day, I was a D&D player and really loved enjoying that, and always thought, man, I want to get those weapons. And when the chainmail opportunity arose, I just thought, well, I do have a sword as well. I'm going to see if I can do that video another time. That's kind of a special one. But I always thought, yeah, well, if you're gonna have a sword and chainmail, wouldn't it be kind of cool to have an axe? Because this is one of those weapons that you always think of when you think of medieval warfare and when you see them in movies. We all know the standard this style axe. In fact, I remember when I was thinking, well, if I'm going to get a battle axe, it's got to be this one with the two blades on it, which, from what I gather, historically is called the Labrys, Labrys. So this is what I was thinking of when I thought battle axe. Now, there's also kind of the Norse, I think, where you've got that blade that comes out and then down with like a big long chin on it. But I wasn't thinking, no, I don't want that. I want, like, the sort of axe that you saw in Dungeons and Dragons. I was always thinking, like this, like the classic dwarf axe. So yeah, this was why I wanted to get this particular axe. And when I was living in England, there was a company that made weapons and armor and shields and you name it. I mean, nowadays there's tons of them, but back in the 80s, it was pretty uncommon to find, and there was a catalog I got through like a mail order thing, and I can't remember where they operated or even what the name was. I was trying to Google it and I was trying to see if I still had the catalog. I don't, unfortunately. They sold this and they really did a nice job. Like, it's got this nice leather bound handle. It's got like this thing is really a nice piece of craftsmanship, and I think it was maybe 50 pounds when I bought it. Yeah, it's super nice. When I was leaving England and going back to Canada, I was running into a bit of a snag because Canada has pretty stern rules about weapons, and you can't just walk in with a sword in your arm. And luckily, the people who made this had told me, well, not to worry, this really wouldn't work very well as an axe at all. And I said, oh, really? Can I get some documentation for that? They said, sure, yeah. The reason why is this thing has no languettes. I believe they're called languettes. Let me move this around. So, on a real axe of this type, you can see here, like, this is the wooden shaft, and there's the cuts. They've obviously slid the blade down here, put a couple of nails in place there, and that is my axe. Now, languettes are these metal, what would you call them? Extensions of the blade that would actually go down and be riveted along this length here. That would be for two reasons. Number one, an opponent couldn't like chop your axe handle in half. And secondly, and this is what the guy who built this for me said, if you were to start brandishing this about, and really would not recommend doing so, but if this was to be suddenly used in warfare, it would probably break relatively quickly because this is more of a decorative piece. Again, this is, it's just a blade that's been secured in place with these two bolts, and it looks very nice, and it's rather imposing looking, but honestly, take a couple of swings. I mean, if I was to try and chop wood with this thing, it would probably break pretty quick. So, yes, he provided me with documentation, so I was able to bring it back to me to Canada and just say it's purely decorative, just like the Morningstar. But boy, isn't it nice looking. And again, the blade is very sharp, so a little bit, it's very cool, really, really like the battle axe. Now, one of the very interesting things in researching the Labrise, the double-headed battle axe, is, if you can believe it or not, this is a very powerful symbol for feminism. Yeah. Let's see, in ancient Greece, I mean, the story of Theseus and the Minotaur being connected to the Cretan town of Knossos, I think that's how you pronounce it, and that goes way back. There seems to have been a connection between the maze that Theseus fights the Minotaur in and the palace of Knossos. And Knossos has a labyrinth within it. And that's sort of where the Labrise name comes from. Or perhaps, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's called the Labyrinth because of the Labrise. Because there are many, many symbols of this double-headed axe hanging or emblazoned on the walls of the maze. So that's kind of interesting. And now, why is it a feminist symbol? Well, the Minoan culture of that area was very, very strongly matriarchal. And what I found kind of very curious is there's even a connection where on a piece of pottery, there's a Perseus vase that is in Berlin, and I'm going to insert a picture here. It shows Perseus cutting off the head of Zeus so that Athena, who Zeus has swallowed, could be freed. And what kind of a weapon does Perseus have over his shoulder? He's got a Labrise, a double-headed axe. Here's that image from the vase that is in Berlin, apparently. Hold it, I made a slight error there. Let me just cut this in, cut this in with the axe. It's a bad joke. It's not actually Perseus who was cutting off the head of Zeus. It was actually Hephaestus. That is who the character is that is freeing Athena, not Perseus. It's on the Perseus vase, but it's actually Hephaestus. And I believe the connection between that story, that vase, and also the fact that it's all of the walls in the Palace of Knossos makes this double-headed axe recognizable as a symbol. It was used in the 70s, or it was sort of reborn in the 70s with a lot of the feminist movement. So I just think that's really cool that not only is this thing, here was me thinking I'm getting, you know, a dwarven axe, the kind of thing you would see in Lord of the Rings, and it turns out, no, this thing has a whole bunch of history to it. A very interesting thing for what is, to my mind, a fantasy battle axe, the kind of thing that I would have used in Dungeons and Dragons all the time. Anyway, so yeah, I just thought I would do a video about my battle axe. I definitely, well, I have an axe to grind, but more importantly, I have an axe that I need to oil. Yeah. Anyway. Until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.